Can you make me a co-host in case I need it, Heather?
I think I did.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hi, everybody. Welcome, welcome. Find the right screen. Welcome, everybody. We're so excited that you are here today. As we get started, we would love for you to introduce yourselves in the chat box. If you tell us where you're from, what are you teaching, grade levels, that kind of thing. And then as we're waiting for everyone to make it from the waiting room into here, I did put a little, what do you notice, what do you wonder, with a picture of our state bird. So as we get started, for whatever reason, Susan, the chat box is not popping up on my screen even when I click it. So if you and even Sam would be monitors. Thank you. Again, welcome everybody to the meeting this afternoon. I appreciate you coming so much. I know that some of you are back at work, and so it is the end of a very long day. So I do appreciate you coming in at 4:30. Just some session norms as we get started today. Please make sure you're on mute. Sometimes background noise, even unintended, can be a little distracting. We do like to see your smiling faces, so if you can turn on your camera, that's great. If not, that's fine too. No one's gonna judge you for having your camera off, because we also know, like, sometimes it's broadband, sometimes you're cleaning, you've got other things you're doing. I've been in many meetings where I'm driving, so the camera has to be off. It's totally okay. But if you can, it's nice to see other people's faces as I'm speaking, so it's not just me talking in my bedroom to a computer. Today, there can be a lot of people in here today, so we're just going to ask if you do have questions as we move through the presentation to please post your questions in the chat box. And if you don't know where the chat box is, we're going to talk about it in just a moment, so that we can make sure everyone kind of knows where that is located. And then we do encourage participation. It's really important that you do ask your questions so that we are here to help you, and we want to be able to do that. Okay, so just a quick rundown of Zoom, just in case you are new to it. Down at the bottom of your Zoom screen, whether you're on your computer or your phone, you're going to see one of two things. You're either going to see this little chat box here, which is what, when we're referring to type something in chat, that is what we're talking about. But if you don't see that chat box, what you're going to see is three little dots that say more. And when you select more, the chat option is going to be listed there. And so you'll be able to select that and interact on the chat screen there. These other two things, sometimes we use them, just kind of be aware if like you wanted to rename yourself, but we're not going to worry about that today, so you don't have to rename your screen or anything like that. And there are some like extra reactions inside Zoom that you can use. There is a hand raise, a agree, a disagree kind of button. I'm not actually able to see it today for whatever reason. Those particular pop-up boxes are not working for me, but we have a few of our wonderful STEM team members here, science team. We're going to introduce them in a minute, and they will be monitoring those things if you end up using any of them. So just so everyone knows, hi everybody, my name is Heather Johnston. I am the new Director of Science and Engineering at the State Department. I come from Putnam City, is where I was a curriculum coordinator there, and then I taught at Norman So I'm a high school chemistry teacher. That was my true love when I was teaching. Today we are also joined by Susan Ray. She is absolutely amazing and is our Oklahoma Excel Science Specialist, and has been an immense help to me as I've transitioned here. She's here today monitoring the chat and posting links for me. We also have Samantha Shepard with us today. She is our new Science Assessment Specialist. She's great. I have really enjoyed working with her, and so I know many of y'all will get to know her as testing questions come up. And then Donna Schweitzer is not with us today, but I do want to mention her as well because she has been a great help behind the scenes, helping organize and gather a lot of the documents that you guys have seen us push out this summer. She is like a table guru. She can do all kinds of amazing things with those. So Donna is also a wonderful part of our science team. So let's talk about the meat of this stuff. So there is a document that is now live on the State Department website, and we will be getting we will be telling you where that's posted. But right now we're just going to highlight these different sections that are a part of our Return to Learn Launching Instruction Guidance document. As you can see, there are a lot of sections to this. There are many, many pages. We will be doing the highlights of these sections, and then we are going to continue monthly virtual meetings. So we'll spend more time deep diving into those based on some feedback, and we'll talk a little bit about that when we get towards the end. So we're going to start today just really talking about standards and pacing as we prepare for the new year. We really want to talk about prioritizing grade level learning. We all know that deep, meaningful learning did kind of end at spring break, and it was very hard to continue that kind of learning that we had hoped for just because of the situation. But we want to make sure that we don't hinder our students' learning by pausing this year's learning to make up for the final 9 weeks from the previous semester. Really, we're hoping to create scaffolds in addressing maybe some of that unfinished learning. So really embedding the content that might have been missed with content at that particular grade level. And one of the ways in identifying how to do that is kind of looking at what your own learning goals are for your grade level, paying attention to the standards. One thing that we're really going to have to pay attention to is kind of eliminating some of the things that we teach that are not necessarily aligned to standards, just to be able to get through this particular school year, whether it's because we're trying to make up some learning or we bounce around between virtual and in-person. We just kind of know that's kind of going to slow some things down. But when we're talking about eliminating something, we're really thinking about let's embed those science and engineering practices throughout the year. So having kids constantly doing science rather than spending an entire unit teaching the scientific method independent of content. And so just kind of eliminating that piece and then embedding it all year long would be an example of eliminating something that's not necessarily a part of the standards. You can also bundle standards, which is kind of what would be helpful when we're trying to take what we did in the spring and build off of that kind of stuff, bundling them together. One thing I want to show you that can really help with this process is the Oklahoma Frameworks for Science. Some of you may know about these. So they provide bundled examples in the different content areas. We do have them kindergarten through high school. Not all the high school standards subjects are here just yet. This coming year, we are going to be updating all of these. So because we do have new standards, these are 2014. It just takes some time to update them. But everybody has these vertical progressions, and this is linked inside the Return to Learn document, so you do not have to feel like you're going to have to remember where this is at. But if you are looking at what might students have missed in the previous year, we have these vertical learning progressions. And for example, here's one for life science, and you can see how the learning progresses across this particular concept. And so if you were doing high school biology and you were wondering what might students have missed before taking the life science class in this particular concept, you could see what concepts and what grade level your students would have learned that material. And we have that for all of the standards through here. Now, again, this is the 2014 standard. So middle school, as you begin to transition, that's going to look a little different. And an updated document like this is coming. So just know that we have it. This is the 2014 document, and we'll be coming out with the 2020. But there are learning progressions for disciplinary core ideas, the science and engineering practices, and even the cross-cutting concepts. So those are just some helpful tools as you are trying to plan on how to scaffold student learning based on where students are when they come into your classrooms for being out of school for so long. The next section in this Return to Learn document really talks about effective instructional routines. We know that in science, students being engaged in doing the science is one of the most important things, so that they're not just being talked to. We want them doing stuff and actively learning. We did include a cycle of learning example for science and for engineering inside this document, and this would be an in-person scenario, right? Normal, regular school, not having closings or distance learning or anything along those lines. This is just your typical cycle of learning in science or engineering. So an entire thing is listed here. It just kind of goes across a usual lesson. Then we know that's not going to be the case for a lot of educators. And so we also want to be able to provide, like, here was this normal in-person kind of routine. What kind of shifts need to happen in order to take what we know is great teaching and learning in science into this distance learning scenario and virtual learning? So inside the document, we are highlighting different types of shifts that might need to occur in order for that to happen. And so there is a table that begins comparing what in-person learning normally looks like and then what distance learning might look like instead. For example, in-person learning has very explicit instruction, right? We're in our classroom, we have our groups, we have our labs, we see the kids once a day. That's a very normal kind of thing. However, when we go to distance learning, depending on their family schedule, their other class schedule, how the district sets all of that up, we might need time for synchronous and asynchronous learning. Unfortunately, you won't be able to help your students every single day like you might have been able to in a in-person learning environment. So what might that look like here? And so they are just providing some, like, here's some things that we can do in distance learning, and they have those shifts back and forth. So what does that look like in an instructional cycle? We provide, there is an example in there. So we provided that in-person cycle of learning example, what shifts can happen, and then we do provide an example of here is something that would be a blended learning experience for someone that doesn't have any technology, and then what would it look like for people that do have access to technology. And so inside of here, we are also hyperlinking so many different resources and supports throughout this document. Again, we just unfortunately don't have time to go through all of those, but as you can see here, when we're talking about what is a phenomenon, there's some information there. when we're suggesting using driving questions board, there's a link there to provide more supports on what that might look like in your classroom. For the digital technology piece, like this one is suggesting using Google Jamboards. It takes you to a session on like, what is a Google Jamboard, in case you don't know what that is. And so we try to link any possible supports throughout this document when we were suggesting them. So you didn't have to then go searching somewhere else for that. This is consistent for an entire cycle of learning. We have even provided free, like links to free simulations. Nothing that is linked in this document requires a paid service. So just kind of as a heads up for that, there won't be anything that like hidden behind a wall or anything along those lines. I was really excited, something that I've always really liked for the chemistry aspect of things, you know, collisions chemistry. Used to be a paid service. It's free now for good. Like it wasn't even because of a COVID thing. They were coming out with it being free before that. And I was like, oh yes, you know, and an interactive way to make molecules. But those kinds of things are all linked also throughout this document. In distance learning, there are a couple of things that we want to kind of consider is leveraging family members as learning partners. We all know that our students' families are going to play a big role in their distance learning. Parents might feel like they are not able to support their students' learning. I'm going to be that person for math, right? My daughter, I'm like, I think I remember what that math problem looked like, but I'm not sure. I don't have to be an expert. We know that as teachers, we don't always have to be the experts either. Parents don't realize that. And so there are like supporting documents in here that you can even provide for parents on how can I be a learning partner rather than feeling like I have to be the teacher because now my kid is learning at home. Also using a digital science notebook. Google has one. That's a really great option, right? And you can also use a variety of platforms for like your units. You can use Flipgrid, and even there's some really neat tools within Google Slides that you can use a template that creates what looks like a notebook and has little tabs and little pages and hyperlinks throughout it. And so there's a variety of ways to be creative about still keeping a science notebook so that you still can track student learning that direction. We've also included a lot of articles and supports about blended learning using digital tools. Over the summer, many organizations have come out with some very fabulous supports along those areas. And so we've linked that in there along with sample lessons and units. Also, so that you don't feel like you have to start from scratch. So those resources are also listed under that blended and distance learning section. This launching instruction with digital tools is an amazing document that our Director of Education Technology and Computer Science, Karen Leonard, put together. And it is I think I actually pulled it up so we can kind of take a look at this too. It is an incredibly rich document, as you can see here, about using digital tools. And so if your district had questions on like, what about tools that's free, but requires student information? Is it really free? Is your student information protected? Things that districts might not be thinking about until now with the use of that. There are also lesson examples for the universal design of learning that goes through here. She also talks about like staggered release of integrating technology, right? We want to make sure that one, you're not overwhelmed. Don't feel like you have to do all of the technology all at one time. Pick one thing, start with that, right? I liked Google Slides. That's where I hung out for a while. And then I discovered Jamboard, and now Jamboard is my favorite. And slowly but surely, like I'm just incorporating one little thing at a time. So go at the pace of you and your students. Like as you guys become more comfortable in utilizing the technology, then try something else. Don't feel like you have to do a whole bunch. They talk about that. Inside of this digital tools document, there are also the links to the Tech Tool Tuesdays that the State Department hosted. And so like the recorded sessions on how to use different technology tools are also linked through that document. So it's an incredibly rich tool. So if you have a PLC or just needing to spend some extra time learning about digital tools, that document is linked within our science one. So again, you only need this one return to learn document and you will have access to everything that we're talking about today. Classroom assessment. This has actually been a question that we are always asked, like, how do I assess my students if I don't see them? Beyond, you know, a multiple choice questions, like if we really want kids to be doing things, how am I going to assess them doing things if I don't actually get to see them? And I also know that some schools in the springtime weren't allowing Zoom or Google Hangouts or anything like that. So you really can't engage with your kids in any kind of way. Remember that anytime students are sharing their thinking, you can assess where they're at in their learning. That's a quick formative assessment. If they're responding to an email, if they submitted a Google Doc, if they're doing like a flip grid and they recorded themselves showing their model, I can assess what they're doing as they're doing it still virtually. It just looks a little different because I didn't get to hear their voice in real time. You can also still do some interim or summative assessments. Some districts create these. It's where you kind of look for them. We did provide a couple of links to the Stanford assessment project called SNAP. They have some fantastic summative assessments that are moving beyond just the multiple choice. We also have the Kentucky State Department has released summative assessment questions too, and both of those are linked inside the Return to Learn document. So if you were looking for some examples of summative assessments, those are going to be there as well. Okay, I know that was a whole lot of information. Before I continue on, has there been any questions? Since I didn't see about the blended learning or the distance learning and supports. Just wanted to make sure. I know it's a lot of information. And so if you do have a question, please put it in the chat box and we can get to those questions. So another way to kind of address the lift that it can take to teach distance learning is integrating with other disciplines and kind of helping reduce the assignment load of students. I know collaborating with other educators, it seems to be something that we always talk about. And then time, of course, gets to us and we just don't have as much time as we had hoped. So in the Return to Learn, we've provided a little bit of guidance on what might that look like. How could we reduce the assignment load and maybe even share some of that instructional stress with our peers. And remember, for literacy, like for some crossover with literacy, we have informational texts to support phenomenon and explanations. Even when they're evaluating multiple texts to gain more information, you can connect some literacy skills through there. Social studies, you know, the historical context of science through the lens of how science ideas developed over time can tie into timelines that social studies is discussing through there. We do have a STEM framework rubric that you can utilize if you were looking at how do I create a STEM activity that goes through here that's, you know, beyond the spaghetti and marshmallow towers kind of thing. And this soundboard is a great tool to just kind of evaluate how a lesson is or is not STEM. it's thinking of it as a musical soundboard where if you turn it up, it's like full on science for that particular letter, or full on technology, or maybe it's not grade level science, but there's some science in there. So like it's turned down a little bit. But the soundboard on evaluating is a lesson STEM or not is included in the Return to Learn guide as something to think about. We also did link to a STEM curriculum resource from Boulder, Colorado, the University of Boulder in Colorado. They have some really amazing science and engineering standards aligned investigations. And so there are really cool things that are associated with that are also linked within our document. So if you're looking at how do I make something more fun or make it STEM, we do provide those resources. So one of the big components also inside this document is social emotional learning and well-being. This is a time of stress for both parents, students, and educators, and ensuring that we remember self-care for ourselves it's really important because if we're going to be there for our students, we're stressed and that kind of stuff, we got to remember to take care of ourselves as we move through this. So there are documents and things inside this Return to Learn to help with managing self-care, especially when you're working from home, remembering to stand up and take breaks. Like we are still working from home, and there are many days where it's been 5 hours and I haven't moved from my chair. So simply remembering those kind of stand up, move to the other room, taking those breaks as needed. And still, kids need that too. And so remembering that a 5-hour school day on a computer screen could be a big lift for kids. And so like, how do we support them through this time, through our teaching and that kind of stuff? And so lots of resources are linked in here on how that can be done. We also want to remember how to make sure our classrooms more equitable and that we're addressing all of our students' needs. When we are doing this in person, a lot of times it's easier simply because we see the things and can make the adjustments as needed. And being in a digital platform, it makes it a little more difficult. And so an example would be, while it might be easier to just pick one form of delivery to talk with parents, that might not reach all of your parents, right? Not every parent might have an email or access to the internet. And so some families might need phone calls or a different way of engaging with their kids' teachers. And so we have a list of like, what are more equitable practices versus less equitable practices? Like, how can we make some of these adjustments and supports as we are moving forward so that we don't leave out students since we don't see them, kind of thing. We want to make sure we're still addressing everybody and including everybody. We are also providing supports in here a lot for teacher reflection on implicit and inherent bias, both within our science curriculum and in our instructional practices. These could be things like only ever calling on the smart kid without realizing it because that student's the one that's engaging. And so like stopping to recognize, okay, Sally, like I need to ask somebody else and look at that. There are some questions inside this document that just kind of help you think about what are the voices coming out of my science curriculum, like who is being represented, who is being acknowledged, what ways of learning are being supported in my classroom. As we all know, there are a variety of ways of learning. So what is actually being represented in my room? So there are many resources for both teacher reflection and in creating an anti-bias classroom within this document. And this is one area that I am looking forward to learning more about. I know that I'm not perfect by any means in this section, but but we did find some really great support specifically for science integration, and you'll find that in this section of our document. Okay, let's talk about probably the #1 email that I have been answering questions to with a lot of go talk to your district. And just as if you were here and you received an email from me about safety considerations, the very first thing is you must defer to the safety guidelines provided by your school and your district. That is a liability thing, right? Your insurance at your school is going to have particular parameters and assurances that your district wants to put in place. So please make sure that you talk to your school and district about safety. The rest of this stuff is coming from latest research when we have been talking and getting information from the Oklahoma Department of Health and the Center for Disease Control on health and safety guidelines. We have also worked a lot with the National Science Teaching Association and several other organizations in what does this look like in a science lab, and how does that work? So I am going to highlight some of the bigger pieces here, but please remember that there is more listed inside this document than the bullet points that I placed to highlight. So know that there is a lot more there. We all know about spacing if possible. I know some classrooms it's just not, but where possible, try to ensure that we have 6 feet in between desks and students. I have been seeing a lot of pictures of classrooms where they have put up partitions between tables, because sometimes you just can't separate the kids. So maybe if we put something up in between them, we need to remember that, especially in the upper sciences, some of those partitions are made out of a material that react to chemicals and will crack. And if they crack, then they're not actually doing the original job that they were intended to do, which is try to stop some particles from going next to the student who's literally on the other side. So just be careful if you do decide to use a partition in your classroom, that you choose a material that won't react to what it is that you were doing in the room. We also know that collaboration is a really big piece of science and how students are learning. And so don't completely give that up in this era of COVID. Try looking at utilizing some digital tools that still allow in real-time collaboration between students, so that they can still get that back and forth and collaborate on a piece. Utilizing more class discussions as we are trying to build consensus and that kind of stuff, doing a lot of the student talk, since we can't always be really close to each other anymore. Of course, wipe down high-touch surfaces, lights, doorknobs, desks, all of that kind of thing. One state, it might be Michigan or something, I really like their approach to it, especially if you guys are working with the older students. I think this is very promising. They're calling it the Karate Kid method, where students were going to wipe in and wipe out. So when they come in, they're going to wipe in, they're going to wipe their desks down before they sit down, and then before they leave, they're going to wipe out, so that they're just ensuring that there is a clean desk and clean chair where they are sitting, that kind of thing. What that looks like for a lot of them, they were talking about, we just need soapy water. A bucket of soapy water, wipe it down. You don't have to have a Clorox wipe. We know that those are short, so short supply. So remember soapy water for 20 seconds. That's how we wash our hands. And to be able to get rid of the virus, you can just wash down your surfaces the same way. Have a bucket of water with a sponge, or a little cup with a sponge of some sort to be able to clean surfaces. I have heard of creating bleach solutions to dunk goggles or dunk materials to try to kill them off. Please remember that bleach burns. So be very careful about the concentration of your solutions when you are making them. And then also bleach breaks down when you add it to water. So it does become weaker over time. And so you can't make a bleach solution on Sunday and use it for 7 days. You will not be guaranteed that it's still as strong as it needs to be to kill a virus come Friday in that scenario. So I would say just use a weak solution and make it up every single day if a bleach solution was the direction that you chose to go. Tape markings on the floor to indicate social distancing are helpful reminders. I love them. They can be funny ones too. I've seen them all around about like 6 feet. I wouldn't touch you with a 6-foot pole I just based on the Christmas movie, but they're talking about the Grinch. Thank you. I'm thinking what that is, right? Just little silly sayings just to remind kids, like, especially, you know, how they get right before that bell rings, everyone wants to crowd that door, just little marking reminders to stay away, keep the distance as much as they possibly can. We really want to look at reducing the use of shared items. Again, you have to clean them in between. So if there is a possibility of encouraging kids to bring their own items, bring your own scissors, bring your own ruler, calculator, that kind of thing. You know, we encourage it. We know kids don't remember. Just know that, like, even a calculator, they need to wipe it down before they share it back and forth, kind of thing. Another thing that research is unclear on is ultraviolet light killing COVID-19, specifically the kind that is in a goggle sanitizer cabinet. It kills bacteria, not necessarily viruses. It might have to be a very particular type of UV light. So just do some research, look at the CDC and the health department websites on that information before only doing UV light to disinfect something. And then we're also encouraging removing any unnecessary items. So glassware that you typically might have just listed out for kids to get, right? Maybe only have the specific glassware that they actually will need instead of having like all 24 beakers out, be like, you get 2 and you get these 2, so that you don't have like kids accidentally, they touch things if they're out, right? And so we don't need to always have to worry about cleaning up behind all of that. Additional considerations for safety, thinking about some new routines and procedures such as traffic flow. What might that look like coming into the classroom, leaving the classroom, distributing materials? We're encouraging to go paperless, right? Save those trees. COVID can last on paper, you know, longer than 24 hours. And so you could use a digital tool to turn in assignments. Kids can take pictures of their work. You can even do a scan. If they have an iPhone, this was something I actually just discovered. I was really excited about it. Using the notes section of their iPhone, you can actually scan a document and it looks like an image. So it's not like a blurry picture that happens. And that's a great way to like have kids submit something. It's just utilizing the tools that they already have in their hand. Android might have something similar. I'd Google it. I don't have an Android, I have an iPhone. So but that's the one thing that I discovered about trying to turn something in. As for investigations, you know, labs are a big part of science. And so we're encouraging maybe just having one student perform the lab and sharing the observations. Other students could be, you know, away, like several feet away, watching them. The student doing the investigation could be typing into a document in order for other students to see what those observations are. You could do a teacher demo, and we have been trying to shift away from teacher demos so that students can do the science, but unfortunately, right now, like that's gonna you can kind of rein that back in and do the teacher demonstration, but have kids tell you what to do, right? What's my next step? And literally do what they tell you, like their next step is. Some of you have probably used that whole like making a bowl of cereal kind of routine, right? And they're like, just put the cereal in the bowl. And so you just take the box and you put the cereal in the bowl, right? Like asking them, okay, no, think about the process of what I'm actually doing. Tell me what needs to be done. That way they're still involved in the planning piece and you're just kind of carrying it out. And then you can give them the data. They can make observations, that kind of thing. And until this is kind of passed. Another consideration is be very cautious of asking kids to do labs at home. The last thing you need is a student to get hurt and it be because you asked them to do a lab at home without the proper protective equipment available. It is highly encouraged that you limit any household use of chemicals to a safety classification of 1. So you're talking like salt. And so you can look at the safety data sheet for household chemicals. A link to safety data sheets is provided in this document. So again, you don't have to go look for that. But even vinegar is a classification of 2. And if kids aren't careful, they can get it in their eyes if you don't provide goggles and those kinds of safety concerns. So one thing is that if kids can't have the safety materials needed to perform a lab, just don't ask them to do that kind of lab at home. If that is just a safety thing. I did sit through a really neat session. So something other, like if you're only doing distance learning, but you want kids to be able to do a lab, if you are able to host a class on Zoom or something like that, and you are doing the lab yourself, like especially if you were in your classroom and you've goggled up and you perform the lab while kids are asking you to do different things, that is another way that they could still see a traditional lab and be engaged in a traditional lab, is they can work in groups and then they can go, hey, can you add X amount of this, or what happens if you dunk this, or whatever your lab happens to be. There's just another option. Okay, we are almost finished. This document has a lot of stuff to it. And so we want to continue to be able to do some deep dives into the different sections of this document throughout the year. We're going to have monthly virtual meetings every second Wednesday of the month. I did send out a poll on the OKSci Facebook page, and the majority of people selected the 4:30 to 5:30 timeline. These meetings will always be recorded, so if it's something that you happen to miss or you can't miss that time, just know that we will be recording the session and then providing links to that as well. Our next session will be September 9th. The order that we're going to go in to these deep dives and these these topics are going to be based on what you want to do. So Susan's going to post, or she may already have posted, a link into the chat box, and you're going to see a survey that looks like this. And so there are 7 topics that are listed here, and you're just going to select your priority number 1 and priority number 7 when you go through this. And so I'm asking that you, like, what if you pick standards and pacing as your number 1 priority, don't select number 1 out of any of the rest of these. So now I can only pick like 2 through 7 on effective instructional routines and so forth. I'm going to use this survey to schedule out our virtual meetings through the year. So just kind of know that's what I'm going to be utilizing that for. So I really do appreciate any feedback. If something is not listed on there and you do want to talk about that, know that that's not an off limits kind of topic. Feel free to email me. I did not actually put a space in there for additional comments, but you can always email me like, hey, I'd really like to talk about whatever. And we can look into that. Another thing that I'm going to work on offering this year and is going to be a monthly virtual support for our new science teachers and teachers new to teaching science. And so it's kind of going to be all encompassing. And this is going to be solely focused on, like, what are the 3 dimensions? What does that even mean? And really taking some deep dives into the instructional supports for 3-dimensional science teaching, and things that new teachers would need to teach science. And so that's actually going to be on the 4th Wednesday of every month. And again, it'll be recorded. More information about these are going to be coming out. I'm still in the planning process of what that schedule will look like. But please tell any of the new teachers, or if you're a new teacher, come do this. We have a lot of people that are still becoming familiar with what 3-dimensional science learning means. And I want to be able to provide a space where that can be the sole focus. So you're not trying to balance learning 3D science and whatever else we are doing during that session. So this way, you have like your own little cohort kind of thing, so we can learn together. Just know there are other ways to connect with educators. This is also linked inside the Return to Learn guidance. So on social media, our Facebook group is incredibly active. There are multiple levels of the OKSci group. OKSci is the general group. There's one specifically for elementary. There's a 5th grade. There's a biology. That might actually be it. But if you want to create one, say, for physical sciences, there is a suggestion on how to do that, and I can start sharing that out as well. So if you just want a specific space for a particular grade level, we can do that. Twitter is also pretty active in the NGSS world, and so you can always take a look at what maybe the nation is doing with science during this particular time. I'd also highly encourage you to get involved with your state level science organizations. So the Oklahoma Science Teaching Association, go visit their website and see what they're up to. You know, they usually have a summer conference. Unfortunately, you know, everything got canceled this summer, but be on the lookout for what they might be doing this fall. If you are a science facilitator or like a coordinator or a department chair, that kind of thing, there is a science consortium that meets monthly, as well as a STEM consortium. And those are just science and STEM leaders across the state that meet once a month. It is during the school day, so that's why it's usually the coordinators that are there. But we have great districts that also send teachers as a representative to be on there. Choctaw is actually one that sends a different teacher representative each month. And it's just kind of a discussion of like what's going on in the state. And so they have monthly meetings. If you're interested in that, just contact me and I can put you in contact with the person for that. The OKSci newsletter, sign up for it. That's where all the information comes. I did have some questions about that. A couple of teachers thought that they had signed up, but they didn't get this newsletter this last time. If you used your school email address, your district might have blocked it. And so go look in your spam or your junk folder or talk to your district about, hey, the state newsletter is being blocked. Is there a way to unblock it to like approve that particular thing? I know in the districts that I've worked in, there were certain times that like I just don't get the state information. It was, you know, marked as spam. And so check there. You can use a personal email on here also. Just know that it does not have to be a school email to sign up for a newsletter. And then at the very end, of course, is our contact information in this particular document. You can always reach out to myself, to Susan, to Sam, or to Donna if you ever have any questions about absolutely anything science related in the state of Oklahoma. And we are very happy to help you, as that is what we are here for. And last but not least, of course, is where to find this document on the State Department website. And so you can Google it, of course, and it'll pop up, but Susan's put the link in there. All things COVID-19 related will be found on the State Department's website here. And you can see it will be under this Return to Learn Launching Instruction piece. And so here is the secondary science document. So you will find that there. And you will also find the digital tools one under guidance for all grades because it was written with pre-K-12 in mind. So science is there. If you have any questions about the lower grades, of course, those are all there as well, but that's where everything is going to be housed. Okay, so that was fast and furious with a whole lot of information. Questions? If people don't mind, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. That way I can see your faces. So if you have a question, you are welcome to unmute yourself at this point also, or you are welcome to type it in the chat box. I can see a chat box now that I'm not sharing my screen. September 9th. Look at my calendar real quick a minute. Yes, so September 9th is the next meeting. That is the second Wednesday, and this type of meeting will be the second Wednesday of every month. It will be always sent out in the OKSci newsletter and announced on the Facebook page. There is going to be a registration link for those, just so I can kind of keep track of who's in attendance kind of thing. More so just for me, we are going to be doing some updates to the Oklahoma frameworks and reaching out and asking for teachers who want to come help redo the frameworks. I'm very, very excited about updating those so that there are a lot more supports and useful resources. So kind of be on the lookout for that. The Science Coordinator Consortium meetings, email me. Here, I'll type my email and I will connect you to the person that sets all of that up. There's been some changes with people moving outside of the coordinator positions. And so the ones who used to do that are no longer there. And so we're still working on who's kind of going to manage contacting people about, hey, when's our first meeting? Which I want to say, Susan, you might remember, was it the first, or Maudine, I think I saw you in here, first Friday of every month? Or was it, okay, I see some head nods. Yes, so it was the first Friday of every month that they met. I don't know if that'll still be the same, but that's just kind of where it is. Yeah, she put it on there. I was like, I think it was, COVID happened, and then we started meeting every Friday just because we wanted to see each other. The science supports in this state, y'all, are unmatched. It's absolutely amazing. So utilize it because we are here for it. Other questions? All right. Don't forget to take the survey. Thank you so much for coming today. I really, really appreciate you attending and spending some of your evening with us. I look forward to getting to know everybody as we move through. Again, please reach out if you have any questions about the document, about not the document, whatever it might be. Email us. I'm going to stop recording if that might be why some people don't want to talk.